Hey guys, welcome to the oh man, it's been so long. I forgot exactly what it was. Eternal Card Breakdown. My name is Pocho. We're going to be talking about Svetya, Orene of Kosul, in front of our Twitch chat and having a delightful time. So, yeah, there's a new hero promo card, as promised. There's going to be one every month from now on. This is Svetya, the Orene of Kosul, which is, Kosul is sort of fantasy Russia as far as we have established, and we're getting a lot more background on Kosul as of right about now, so it's pretty exciting stuff. I would highly recommend that you go look at the announcement, which we'll link in the doobly-dooble of the YouTube description, and we'll also link it to Twitch in just a little bit. Yeah, as far as that goes, it's pretty exciting. What is an Orene? Well, an Orene is some sort of Russian or fantasy Russian nobility in this case, but it is not an official term. I think it means something like nurturing mother in very specific setups, but it is not I think an actual word. I think it is sort of a made-up title for this particular type of setup. However, this person is your prime minister, your czar, as far as things go, and just is the person in charge, or the heiress. And that is basically what Svetya's position is as far as Kosul is concerned. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting stuff. Svetya is a really good card overall, and she's another card designed to sort of bump Huru a little bit and give it a little bit more of a win rate. Basically, Huru kind of has this general lack of 4-drops that it's always sort of been struggling with. You use Auric Runehammer in that position, you use a couple of other cards, specifically that 4-drop 5/5 Shelter Ring Rider is extremely good in that spot, but getting a decent amount of stuff in that area is kind of important for Svetya to be running, and this is indeed super amazing art that we are definitely excited to be showing off. We have a full wallpaper version of this that we'll show off after we've talked about the card itself. So Svetya, a 4/4 for 4, green and blue influence, not too deep, just one of each, so as long as you're in Huru, you should be fine. You can splash this pretty easy in Cambrai, and I highly recommend it because she's actually very good in that setup. Yeah, so what she does is she has a summon effect that says the enemy player can't play spells or weapons until your next turn, which is awkwardly located at the bottom of the card. This is the only card I can think of that has the summon effect on the bottom of the card as opposed to the effect that you're using multiple times. So kind of a little bit weird, but I think overall in terms of templating it doesn't really matter. It's just interesting to note. So this is a fairly unique summon effect. This is something that we don't actually have in the game at the moment, and as far as lockdown goes, it is actually pretty devastating. So it prevents your opponent from playing spells or weapons until your next turn. You can respond to it with a fast spell, or at least that's what I'm hearing. We will certainly do some testing with it, but if you have a Wisdom of the Elders held out, or if you have a Death Strike that you want to play on Svetya, then you will be able to respond. Although if you kill Svetya while the trigger is on the stack, of course, because it is a summon trigger, you will still get the effect, and your opponent will not be able to play spells or weapons of any other sort until your next turn. So responding to that effect does, of course, still is allowed, but it is not something that is going to necessarily help your cause if you're trying to lock down the board for basically anti-harsh rule, or any sort of I don't know, if you want to do shenanigans against temporal distortion, any kind of fast spell lockdown is pretty important. Okay. So, in addition, this also is an Aegis popper. If you're targeting your opponent with it, so it will pop their Aegis and cause them to basically lose that. Obviously, you want the effect if you can get it, but popping the Aegis is a nice side effect. 4-drops that pop Aegis are actually pretty effective, and Steward of the Past used to be pretty reasonable for having that effect against a lot of the sort of Felm type decks that really want to protect their own hand. So if you're trying to get at your opponent's hand with other effects in addition to using Svetya, then that might actually help out a little bit. But I don't think that that's Svetya's exceptional strength. Most of what she's doing is she's adding some good tempo and mid-range play to Huru, and also a little bit of late-game presence, which is always nice to see. So Svetya's other ability is pay 8 and exhaust her to draw all units from the top 4 cards of your deck, and then discard the rest. Now the other, well, I said ultimate ability, it is not an ultimate ability. You can use this multiple times whenever you want. It's very similar to Siraf's exhaust ability, which creates a unit and plays it. It is an endless source of value. until, of course, you run out of cards. So Svetya, I would say, is typically going to be drawing like 1 to 2 cards with this setup. It is a little bit tricky. You may not get any cards at all, which is certainly a lot to spend 8 on if you're not 100% certain of the results. But if you're playing a very creature-heavy deck, with which Kosul is very, very fond of, actually, then that's something that you're going to be really interested in. Yeah, this is something about sort of the Kosul Brigade setup where basically you have that no need magic if you have bear plan, right? You want to actually just play a lot of Huru units, a lot of like sort of mid-rangey tempo stuff, and then if you play Svetya and she's locking down your opponent's stuff, your opponent's spells, then that keeps the units protected for longer, so your Aegis units are a lot happier. You're locking down weapons completely with not only Svetya, but also the Huru pacifier, the 3/4 that prevents your opponent from playing weapons. And you can do a lot of sort of like messing with your opponent's overall game plan, or rather messing with your opponent's ability to mess with your game plan, and playing a bunch of units in that respect. Okay, so like overall strengths of Svetya are kind of the strengths of interesting like Huru decks, and that is that you have the ability to lock down a large amount of control. You kind of play sort of an anti-control setup here, where you are countering weapons, which is pretty important for getting rid of relic weapons like Auric Runehammer, dealing with sort of armory style decks, although armory style decks are still very capable of dealing with a lot of these things using harsh rules and torches and many, many other things. Still, it gives you a lot of tools to sort of outplay those particular styles. And if you want to play a deck like that, there's definitely available space with Svetya. You can use Svetya, Huru Pacifier, to lock down weapons. You can use cards like Valkyrie Justicar to lock down cards that cost 4 or more. You can use Daring Pioneer, the 4/4 that counters a spell whenever the turn that it is played. So that's another thing that can be really, really helpful. And of course, like if you're playing a bunch of sort of aggressive units, 2 to 3 drops, and you play Svetya on 4, the turn 4 is typically about the point where you're going to get harsh ruled, or where you're going to get some sort of big sweeper like Hailstorm or anything along those lines. Svetya prevents those answers from happening, and that's pretty cool stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, like, the general weakness of Svetya is that her stat line is only okay. It's not amazing. 4/4/4 is not quite stock average, I would say. Like, it's very good, but it's not good enough to deal with, say, like Sandstorm Titan or any of like the sort of really, really aggressive cards like Crownwatch Trader, Impending Doom. Like, there are a lot of 4-drop cards that have like quite a bit more stats than this with some type of downside. So Svetya has a lot of upsides, but her overall stat line is a little bit on the weak side if you're trying to sort of push. 4 attack is exactly within range of Vanquish. 4 health is kind of on the weak side. It's out of range of Torch, which is nice, but like as a fairly well-rounded unit, Svetya is vulnerable to a lot of like the current meta, and that can be kind of tricky. She's above Hailstorm, which is pretty important. She's above Torch. She answers weapons, so she actually is pretty ridiculously hard to kill in many different situations. It's just that she's going to have more of a hard time actually attacking through, which is something that Svetya decks are probably going to be wanting to do to take advantage of their sort of limited window of opportunity that they create with their summon effect. So I don't think it's usually a bad idea to play Svetya, just because as a 4-drop, she's filling a very, very important slot. She's messing with your opponent's stuff and disrupting their tempo. She definitely belongs in more creature-focused decks if you can do it. And this, I think, is going to become a Kosul theme in Set 4, just because, like, from what we've seen of Kosul Brigade and of Svetya, I don't know if Set 4 is actually going to be a set with triple factions or with new factions. Like, Kosul might just be the new Huru in this case. There's all sorts of ways that this could pan out, but it looks like there is some sort of Huru-themed setup that's going to be based around creatures that have a lot of disruption and a lot of anti-spell themes. And playing to those themes is actually going to get you some pretty strong Svetya decks. Other things that you can do with Svetya that I think are really interesting, you can play very much Huru good stuff. Like, basically there's just now a really decent amount of Huru cards that are very well statted and have lots of good upsides and lots of good abilities. You've got Kosul Brigade at 6, you've got Nostrix Lord of Vision, the 5/7 that gives you just a huge amount of value. You've got Shelterwing Rider, the 5/5. You have just like a pile of interesting cards there that you can play with that are just like really, really good and aggressive, and just a lot of very, very mean creatures that you can play with. There are lots of good owls, there are lots of good bears, there are lots of good blue dinosaurs that you can play around with. You could do like sort of stat-focused stuff, maybe even a little bit of Mentor. I don't think Watcher of the Big Ones has seen any good decks yet, but as a 4/6 for 4, it kind of belongs alongside Svetya in sort of a big giant stat pile, and that might be an interesting deck to run with. Overall, in terms of playability, I'd say this is an A- to a B+. Like this is not something that's necessarily going to skyrocket Huru to tier 1, but it is going to improve Huru deck's win rates a significant amount. I think we're going to see like a decent amount from it. Oh, is Watcher of the Big Ones a 3/6? I thought it was a 4/6. I thought they moved it up, but I guess I could be wrong. In any case, it's still a big old pile of stats. So good stuff. Yeah. So that's all really, really cool stuff. Now, like, I'm very excited about this card primarily because of the art and the lore. And I said previously, like, this character is sort of, like, I would say it's pretty well inspired. Like it is drawing heavily from a lot of like Russian sub-themes. Specifically, I would say the tale of like Anastasia. Like if you have like you have that sort of like Russia after the riots theme going on here, except that Svetya is a significantly more empowered character than say like the not quite Disney Anastasia. Who is the animator who does that? I can't remember his name, but not so like there's a little bit of like the cartoon Anastasia in this character, but also like she has like a really cool backstory. I actually think that this is like one of the best like contained story. It is the best contained story that they've told in Eternal so far. So go check that out. It's really, really cool to read. I think that it's a very good demonstration of how both Svetya and Kosul work, and like what's really cool about their characters. Greek Yogurt, thank you for subbing. Like it's pretty awesome stuff, and like overall, like it's pretty good. It is Dawn Bluth. Okay, I actually thought I wasn't sure. But like, yeah, this is a very rad character. She is sort of an escaped and deposed Orene coming to Argenport for help. Upon arriving in Argenport, she finds Argenport under siege and decides to become the helper, because that's just how the Kosul roll. And I think that, like, yeah, it's pretty neat stuff. It's well worth a read. It was a very, very good experience overall, and the art for this card is absolutely amazing. So let's go ahead and show that off as well. We have the full art here. I'm going to go ahead and put that on the top, and maybe even just show it in widescreen because it's full wallpaper. It's gorgeous. Like, you got this sort of painting style that's really, really sort of evocative of, like, actually, like, the... like actually a lot of paintings that are sort of based around this era. So like I think it's doing some really, really good like historical referencing with the art, but also the art is just gorgeous. Like it's really, really good. And this is like a pretty amazing painting. Definitely worth another look if you want to see it. But yeah, like lore wise and art wise, this one knocks it out of the park. It's pretty crazy. Okay. So yeah, that's Svetya. She's a 4/4 for 4, like certainly a reasonable card in Huru. Gonna be really, really interesting to see where this goes in set 4, but also like this is adding like a little bit of extra life to set 3 cards and enabling some really interesting Huru gameplay. I hope that it sees some play in tournaments. It's a hard card to figure out. Mostly, it's not so much a hard card to figure out as it's a hard card to play. Like, because it uses a lot of different sort of opportunities, like you want to play that spell and weapon summon at the exact point when it's best. You want to use Svetya as an aggressive unit. You also have like a pay 8 ability that's really useful in the late game. Like there are a lot of different ways that she can be good. All of them are slightly under par, and you have to be very, very careful about when it is that you use them. But because she has so many different upsides, she's actually a very, very strong card, and I would highly recommend her in just about any deck because she'll fill those slots pretty well. She requires a lot of skill to play, but I would say that overall, like, she's definitely doing just a pile of good stuff for your deck. And in terms of Huru creature decks, like, this is something that's going to open up As always with the hero promos, a lot of interesting stuff. I can't wait to brew with her. We've got our first copy already. We're going to get a few more, and we're going to start up Svetya week very, very shortly. I've also got one more Bren deck to upload. That Bren week didn't go very well. It took a very long time to figure out what we wanted to do with it, but we got one last one to go, so that should be up, I think, tomorrow or the day after. And to the YouTube folks, thank you for watching. We're done with the card breakdown. We're going to go play some more Eternal. See you guys soon.